Okay. There's two cases. Okay, so perfect. Okay, let's see. Sure. And let me start the show slide from the beginning. And I hope you can see that. Okay,
Yeah.
Jim?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
So I'm with you by voice, guys. Sorry, I don't know what's going on.
Hey, Chris, welcome.
I click the link 3 or 4 times, and it just sits there and looks at me. It won't do anything. So anyway,
All right.
I can hear you.
Okay. Jim, you have the floor.
Okay, there we go. Hey, I don't know if anybody's been there before. This is my second conference that I've been to over there.
Wow.
And it's really kind of a unique time where there's different, I mean, it's for the site stewards, but there's also all kinds of resources there. And I think it's a great networking opportunity. And one of the things that was interesting to me was wildfire and its impact on archaeology. And as we all know, Arizona gets hit with hundreds of thousands of acres that are burnt on an annual basis. And not only is it natural resources, vegetation, but it's prehistoric and historic resources that are impacted by that. And once a fire begins, even if it's like in the city of Scottsdale, if it goes into like near the goosenecks and hits the McDowell Mountain Preserve, or if it's near the Tonto, the National Fire Interagency Center really gets involved, and they take the reins of the actual process of fighting the fire. And in fact, it's interesting, the anti-terrorism unit has really taken a page out of the wildfire management. They use that process in how they dispatch resources. And that National Interagency Fire, they'll dictate a certain team, and of that team, there's all kinds of resources that goes into that. And one of the things that really hit me, and this happens all over, and there was a Grand Canyon archaeologist that travels all over the West, and he's a Dene, and he's also an archaeologist at Grand Canyon. But one of the things that they do is they identify different sites in any kind of area. And this may have already been done or not, but one of my questions was, in thinking about this, is how does the city manage cultural resources within the preserve? In doing so, do they prioritize certain different sites, whether that be the Browns Ranch area, which is historic, the North Shelter, prehistoric, and I understand there's also been a significant pot, Hohokam possibly, pot found on Granite Mountain. And so, like, how do we identify those areas and kind of protect them? Let's see. Oh, next slide.
Okay.
So they do take into consideration, there's different techniques and different ways to protect things. One is exclusionary tactics, which basically they build a barrier around it, whether it be a fire line or retardant. There's different techniques. There's wrapping techniques that are becoming more and more effective. Another thing that they do is they manage the fuel load and reduction. And one of the things that really triggered me was the whole invasives. We do have invasives in the preserve. In fact, I gave a picture to Paul. I didn't realize when we were there last time, but there's some buffalo grass near the preserve, or not near the north side area. I flicked a picture to Paul, and he really didn't realize that. He didn't recognize that as an area that had buffalo grass in there. So that's one thing that maybe we can also work with that team, is to maybe prioritize some of these sites, so you don't get that infestation, because that is like the bulk of like what's gone on in the superstitions, as well as the Tonto recently. It's the invasive species that have really lit a match to all this. The other piece they do is artifact collection, and that goes back to the that that location of that ceramic on Granite Mountain, is that maybe something that we should identify and actually kind of have scoped and maybe discuss that and have that as a plan with the city or not. And then time burns, I don't think that's applicable if we don't want to be burning up our preserve, but nevertheless, that was one of the mitigation strategies. Next page. And again, it's basically identifying the valuable priorities within, just record and collect the information that may be at risk, create fire breaks around the site. And we're kind of fortunate in the sense that we do have our trail system. So if that does happen, if we do have a system, and I'm sure the city's well aware of this, but you can also widen some of the trails to create fire breaks for a lot of these areas. But again, I don't know how the city, or have we even talked about addressing fire. I think next page. And here's like a page that I pulled and the different impacts as far as the different treatments and the different potentials that you can kind of mitigate any kind of damage, whether it's historic sites or prehistoric sites. And it does impact even like glyphs all the way to buildings and pictographs. So I thought this was kind of an interesting summary that's been put together. But nevertheless, I just thought this was an interesting perspective as a group, as the Pastfinders. Do we have a plan if there is a worst case condition, if there is a fire? And maybe that's something we address with the city. I don't know if we have one or not. And so that was one of the questions I had. And that's kind of like the summary of what we had on there. So is there any questions or any thoughts? And I guess the question is, do we have a plan?
Well, I think what you should, one thing you should certainly be looking at is the Cultural Resources Master Plan City Council approved several years ago that included a section in the preserve, actually in Brown's Ranch in the preserve. So there was an overall study done, prepared by archaeologists that was approved by the city that created a master plan. But it didn't include, it didn't give information to the public, certainly, on all the resources that are out there and how they're being mapped and recorded. But a lot of the preserved land has been surveyed and a lot of sites have been recorded. And then the city's been part of the selection process for Pastfinders and others wanting to be site stewards. So they've helped identify what they think are the most critical sites, as well as the McAllister Arm Preserve Commission. But I'd say, yes, there's a plan, but it's an incomplete plan. It's kind of an overall direction, but there's, other pieces to be done as a follow-up to what's already been approved by council. So there is something out there that definitely needs to be looked at.
And Don, I guess this relates to the actual, like, in case of an emergency plan, like for fire.
Okay.
And that's where
I haven't, I'm not aware what the new city fire department's doing. I say new, but it's more than 10 years old since they took over from Rural Metro. But they've had a wildland fire plan with Jim, I can't remember his last name, but they've had wildland fire plans for a while, but exactly what's going on lately, I don't know. And then as far as archaeological sites, I guess the city's plan has mostly been avoiding them with trails, or not having them open to the public unless we know how we can secure them and protect the resource from any public damage and vandalism. So until we have better plans for things like Brown's Ranch headquarters and other places, people are supposed to stay on trail. So avoidance has been the main strategy. But as far as fires, it's recognized that grasses, whether it's red brome or others, are hazardous to the preserve in general and are invasive. But somebody proposed, Chet Andrews proposed to rent a goat or something, putting some sheep out there to reduce the amount of grasses and things in the spring. But Game and Fish objected. They thought it was going to lead to too much concentrated nitrogen as a result of them eating up the grasses. But
I know that
I haven't seen any comprehensive plans, but there may be something by the fire department that I'm not aware of.
right.
And I guess the idea would be is we have these archaeological, and to your point, Don, the city has already gone through, we've been saying, okay, these are the sites that we're going to be monitoring.
Right.
It must be of a priority. So in case there is an emergency or in case there is a wildfire, how do we, is there a plan? And it's asking the question
Yeah.
to the city, have we identified those and do we want to protect those? So when another agency comes in, they understand that these are priorities within the city in the preserve that we want to kind of protect, whether that be Brown's Ranch or the archaeological sites. I think that's the question, which I thought was an interesting question, is like, true, we have a plan, but like, okay, in case of an emergency plan, is this identified as something worthwhile to save?
I think it's a good point, and is a question we have to pose to the city. My understanding is that there is a plan to protect the perimeter of the preserve, and they're doing it in the last few years. It took several initiatives to widen a kind of a barrier all around it, but I don't think there is anything inside the preserve. So this is a very good question that's worth asking, and go from there. Especially now that the city finally identified some site they want to took a priority. Obviously, there are more there, so they choose the first 5. That means there's a priority on those, and asking the question in respect to the fire. Okay.
Yeah, I
very
would
good.
just say, hey, Jim, during the process of finalizing the sites, the whole idea of the type of plan you're talking about was never mentioned once. So I would be surprised if there is anything, because it never came up at all.
Okay.
All right.
This is a good time to be discussing this topic. I was coming out of Brown's Ranch about a week ago, and I encountered 2 trucks up on the Brown's Ranch Road. One was a private vehicle and the other was Jim Lowlett's vehicle, and Jim was in the area. He is currently, as we speak, working with a private contractor to remove buffalo grass and other non-native grasses in the Brown's Ranch area. I think they're in the, from the comments I got from Jim, they're in the bidding process for this. So it may be a good time to perhaps contact Scott or Jim and put this at least on the table, so that if they have a chance to factor it into any of their planning, they can do so. That would be my observation. And Don, I would ask you to weigh in on this, because you've been around, I think, a lot longer than most of us and worked with the city. I only recall one interagency response to a fire in or near the McDowells, and that was the Rio fire in 1995. The other fires, like the TP fire back in 1993, and some of the more recent small fires, have all been responded to by either Scottsdale Fire or Rural Metro, depending on whose jurisdiction they were in.
As far as I know, that's probably correct, unless there was the fire up near Carefree Cave Creek was close to the border up there, and it could have involved Phoenix or another city's fire. But I think the Rio fire, because it threatened the county park as well as McDowell Mountain Regional Park, as well as potentially going up into Tonto National Forest, although it may not have burned any of Tonto National Forest, it definitely was a coordinated effort. So yeah, it was expanding very rapidly over a course of 2-3 days, and definitely was interjurisdictional in terms of where it was located. So that definitely required cooperation. If it starts in the city, then I think the city would start with its firefighting ability. And but if so how often we would involve the National Forest that has wildland fire crews as well as the city does. I'm not sure what that coordinated response is, unless it's also threatening Tonto Forest as well as city land, preserve land. So.
And if fires are activated, like on the tunnel, archaeologists are usually sent out to make sure those sites are identified. And there's also a prioritization that's already taken place. And so I thought the question was just interesting that have we done the same too?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I
you're-
haven't, go ahead.
Great point. We're gonna, Mitch and I will meet with the city and we'll pose the question. I think that's a good time.
Recording in progress.
We know that, thank you. What?
Okay,
Okay,
Look
so
what I did now.
all right, all right,
Hey,
okay.
Okay, this one, I mean, it doesn't it's more like an archaeology piece and there's just a couple slides here, but I just wanted to make you another project that I'm working on. It's the Great Bend of the Gila, which is a pretty significant site, which is down in just near Gila Bend. Next slide is basically this is an area about 84,000 acres. It's been around for more than 12,000 years. It's the cultural crossroads between the Gila River, the salt comes in, but it's also an area that is at the junction between a lot of different sites. And this goes way back. And if you haven't been there, it's an amazing site. And there's countless examples of stunning petroglyphs. And they also have, the next page has a picture of some geoglyphs, which are these, you've seen pictures of down in Peru where they have those line of sights where this is like from space, you can even see them. We actually have those here at the Great Bend of the Gila, as well as there's ball courts down there, and it's fascinating down there. And I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but I think it's a worthwhile visit if you are interested in archaeology. I'm working with Aaron Wright, who's we're in the process of either trying to get this legislatively as a national conservation area or legislatively as a national monument. Next page. And it's just
how long is that figure in the middle there that looked like a great long whatever? How long was what we were looking at, the scale of what we were
that
just
page?
Yeah.
There's like, I don't know if you really go in, there's a person there. So this is,
a person, okay.
yeah, there's like a dot, I should say, it's big.
Okay, it's quite long, yeah.
Yes, it's quite long.
But the scale is 10 meters.
Oh, there's
This little
10
guy,
meters,
so,
okay.
this is probably at least 150 meters for sure.
A football
Yeah.
field, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a mile, yeah.
Oh, a mile.
And there's multiple of these down there too, which is kind of interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the next page is this is being proposed. Again, it's 84,000 acres. You can see where this is at. It includes Bureau of Land Management land, reservations, state of Arizona, and private parties. Out of coincidence, I'm going to be meeting with one of the Oatman farms, and they're into regenerative agriculture, which is kind of really taking care of the land. And I'm going to go down there in a couple weeks and take a look at his property. In my past life, I was with Campbell Soup, and they need some help on some consulting. But nevertheless, they're all about trying to keep this area as protected as possible, even that private parcel within the proposed monument area. So it's kind of a unique area. And it's just something that I hoped, like if we look at the national monuments being proposed in the state, this is one of the areas. There's also 2 wilderness areas that are also already existing in this area, in this proposed national monument. So it could be kind of the next big thing. If you look at national monuments, there's something called the Great Bend or the Great Grand Canyon Heritage Monument, which is in the North Kaibab, north of Grand Canyon, which is a big wildlife connector. That's probably the next possible monument, but this is probably the second next monument to get preservation within the state of Arizona. So that's
How many
all I have.
counties is this in? Or what counties is this? Would this?
This is down near Gila Bend.
Gila Bend, right? But what is it? Goes beyond Maricopa County, I assume.
Yeah, I don't know what county actually.
Like maybe Pinell or
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know, but again, a lot of this is BLM land, so they're the managing land agency on this program. So Southwest Archaeology is taking the lead. Sierra Club and the Wilderness Society are taking secondary supportive roles in this project.
That would be interesting to have a presentation on that. In general, I have to say, Sean told all the audience that all the presentation of the conference will be sometime on the website, and we'll see when, but I'll certainly, this will be one presentation I would like to see. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
You know, back to this too, Jim, your project here, you know, in the past, guys, we've talked about maybe doing, you know, field trips type of activities. This might be a perfect idea for one.
Yeah, it's like a 2-hour drive down there, and
Yeah.
they'd be open to it.
Okay.
Jim, I've got a question for you. I understand that, you know, the protecting that your group is trying to do is to give it national recognition, but in the short term, are they doing anything to protect what's there? Like those cool pictures that you showed, you know, our concern in the preserve is not revealing anything because of, you know, defacing them and vandalism. Are they doing anything in the short term before or even after they get this designation? Do they have any techniques or activities that protect them from those kinds of things that we're afraid of and the city in particular wants to avoid?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are different models involved. If you look at like Wapaki or Tuzigoot or Montezuma's Castle, they've really hardened their spots. So they put a lot of stabilization in and that. Then you go the other extreme would be the Agua Fria National Monument, where there's like 10,000 sites there. And that's pretty much very rustic and not a lot of like hardened scapes. So this is leaning, from what I understand, more towards the rustic kind of national monument status. There has not been a lot of vandalism down there, but it's like anything else, it's always a possibility.
It is currently open to
relatively out
visitation,
of the
correct?
way.
It's open to visitation now. You can walk in and look around.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's BLM land, so, which is pretty laissez-faire, should I just say? Yeah.
But Jim, is it out of the way so people wouldn't normally be finding the location?
Yeah, it is. You drive down. Yes, it is. You go through some farms and fields, and then you kind of go up into this BLM area. Yeah, it's not publicized.
Yeah, and that's the difference between a location like that and what we're dealing with in the preserve.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I am by no means recommending that we publicize where our sites are. If anything, just kind of maintain what we do have. And the area that I think does have a lot of visitation already is just Cathedral Rock with everything. I mean, that's like one of the highlights of the area. But I don't know if that's even under consideration for kind of highlighting some of the prehistoric.
Okay.
You know, I don't know. Is that something that anybody's interested in, or?
Well, there definitely are. I mean, in terms of petroglyphs, there's definitely a lot of petroglyphs in the central area of the preserve and along the wash that kind of leads up to the saddle. And
Dixie Mine too.
I don't know if that's in whether that's one of the 5 sites. It may not be, but there's a whole lot of petroglyphs in that along the wash.
It's not, Don. Those sites, the petroglyph sites down that you'd get to, say, via Gateway and stuff, they were talked about, but ultimately the decision was made to have them be part of the second phase.
Okay.
Okay, so they were mentioned, but not in any great detail. And what was just said is that, yeah, the idea has been keep them hidden so people can't.
Right.
If they can't see them, they can't destroy them, that sort of thing.
The trail goes above it. It's not too far away, but
You're close,
there to
but you
kind of
have
head
no
down to
idea
the
that you're
wash
close.
to see
Yeah.
them. But yeah, so there's 5 sites now, but there was still a list of maybe 10 or something that were
Yeah,
priority
that
sites
was,
as well.
we worked off of the list that you had made umpteen years ago, that initial list.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we worked as sort of a starting point. And then that was, the decision was made to do the 5 up north first, with the southern, quote unquote, southern ones being the second phase.
Right. Good.
Well, Jim, thank you very much. That was very interesting. And the fire, certainly it opened up a very good question to be continued with the city. And this Ogila band is phenomenal site. I think we might have additional conversation on that. So really appreciate
You
that.
bet.
Okay, let me share second part of this presentation here. And slideshow.
There it is.
From the beginning. I hope you can see that. Let me know if you do.
Yes.
Yeah,
If you don't,
we got it.
if you don't, I turn everything down. I go home, stay home. That's okay. Okay, so so this is just the initial page, just to say that the conference was at 29 and 30, and it is being in conjunction with Historical Preservation Conference. So now Preserve AZ, which means that there were a number of presentations that may not entirely focus on the site steward program, but they're overall in the same line with the preservation in Arizona. The news that we had is the Arizona Site Steward program is now part of SHPO, State Historical Preservation Office. It's not irrelevant because Sean is basically a one-person program. It doesn't have any other help except for some volunteers that once in a while helping on that. So as SHPO probably will provide resources to the program, which is going to be very welcome. Okay, so it was 2 days conference in 2 locations, and hotel in Doubletree and Pueblo Grande. There was a number of sites, and these are the workshop I attended to, and are really tied to what we are doing, we want to do on the sites, reflect a lot of information that we had during our training on the site steward manual. And there's the first one is the crime scene management. So how do you approach a site and will be aware of presence of other people, possibly before or during your presence. And the second one is recording your site like a crime scene using photography and sketch map to record the scene, a crime site. And the third is goes into the archaeological sketching 101. That's really interesting little workshop, but you will see that has its own interest. Finally, I attended the historical artifacts identification workshop. It was a 2-part of it, and we'll give you a short idea what there was in there, and one on Northern Arizona ceramic. So we'll go through these events here, and started with the crime scene management. This is by Dusty Whiteman, is a Native American person that is working with the fire department, with obviously with the Arizona State, the park preservation, and a lot of experience. And he started with this simple statement. I wrote it down because that's for the perpetrator will bring something to the crime scene and will leave with something from the crime scene. That's when if you go in the site and you want to know whether or not it's been visited or not. That's certainly keep that in mind. And so look at physical evidence, because those are not lying. And the last thing is we as site steward, we are not looking for tracks, but we are looking for the impression of tires, impression of footwear. That's kind of the language that he reminded all of us. Now, what you need to know for your visit. The first thing is to be prepared because you want to come back home safe and sound. And the first thing is to look at your backpack, what is in there. And I put together here some of the essential that if you have been to first aid class, you should know very well. Important among the have a GPS, whether it's GPS unit or Maprica, a compass. There will be a compass, a physical compass probably would be better, but a phone application certainly is good as well. Water, a lot of water, food, sugar and salty snacks, emergency blanket, duct tape, all this stuff are important. I know they're important. I know people agree with that. I also notice that people don't bring it with them, even though they're all in agreement they should have it, but they don't. But there is something in addition to that that we should consider to bring with us, which is a binoculars. The point is that when you approach a site, go into a location where you can see the site from a distance and use the binoculars to see whether or not there is somebody there. It could be a visitor. I mean, it could be somebody that's trying to damage the site, whatever the case. But if somebody is up there, point is, don't even try to engage. The recommendation is get out, document that, and because you don't know if you're going to be safe to get there. The second thing is have gatherers with you. We go off trail to get to a site. I'm thinking about Brown's Ranch, but any other place. And there are places where also snakes are living, and being protected here is important. Hiking poles, it's another essential tools we should have. To handle difficult terrain is one thing. The other one is to move stuff around before moving the next steps. Snakes usually off trail don't expect visitors, so may not advertise their presence. Gloves, important as well. Bring some gloves, so do not touch artifacts. It also helps if you have to go through boulders and stuff to protect yourself. And of course, you need paper and pencil. And that's essential. And above all, emergency contact, driver license, medical insurance, all this stuff that we all know we should have with us. Okay.
Franco, will this be on the Pastfinder section of the website?
All this material will be on, yes, on our website.
That's all we need.
Yeah, absolutely. As a tips, always go to the site with a partner. Never go by yourself. It's a safety precaution, medical as well as encounter that you may have, not a case to go by yourself. Never go to a site with friends and family. This we are site steward, and this should not be public. The site we are visiting should not be publicized. Don't use it as I know this place. There are people coming from out of town, so I'll show you the place, nice, cool place where I used to work. Please don't do that. And never go to a site from the same route. That's to avoid to create trails that can be recognized after a while. Look and listen before approaching the site. That's, as I mentioned before, use binoculars, but also see if there is something approaching and take a look. All is related to safety. I know this may be not so critical on the preserve, but in general, this is a good advice. So if the site has visitors, quote unquote, we don't know which kind, do not confront. That this has been stressed several times, but leave and document that. So that's all we have been asked to do. We don't need to be a policeman, and not archaeologist and not a policeman. Okay, so interpretation tips. When you look and listen, when you look especially, assess if the impression that you see of footwear or tire are old or fresh. I know this is, to me, is like saying we don't have experience for that. We've done some walking outside, and I saw some impression of tires, new and old, and I could recognize which one were old, which one were new. It's not really difficult to recognize that. It's important, and also and especially where they come from and where they probably went to. So in all this information, I need to be, let's put in a piece of paper, possibly taking pictures of that, and or sketches if you don't have any other means. Don't walk over those impressions, but try to stay outside that and not disturb what you're saying. He said, don't disturb the scene, and take pictures and stuff and document that, and overall minimize the time of the site, because the more you stay there, the more you walk, and the more you potentially interfere with the impressions there already there. And lastly, I thought that this was a extremely interesting concept of free grabbing. What is free grabbing? I think if you have been with Scott Wood when we went to some training on the site, he did that, and it didn't call it free grabbing, but did that, meaning you take a position which maybe is an overlooked kind of in respect to everything else. Stop there and pay attention. You already look at feature, artifacts, and whatever. Now look everything else. And 360 degrees, see if there is anything that catch your attention. Paper on the floor, leftover of a snack, tools. Because if it is somebody that was there with digging, and they don't want to go back and forth with tools, they may leave it there. They hide in it. If you see something like that, just leave it where it is. Anything, including, wrapping paper and stuff, make a note of it and record that. The reason is because somebody is visiting the site, maybe he knows what he did, or maybe he did it on purpose. You want to know somebody's checking on him. So that's a free grabbing. I think is interesting. Is a last look, if you want, at the site, and pay attention to it. Okay, let me see if there is more. Okay, so that's what is about the impression and approaching a site and take all the measure to do a job that preserve your safety and doesn't reduce the visibility of the fact that you went there. Do you have any question on that? Okay, so the second workshop was by Samantha Robinson. I don't know if you remember his name. Sean mentioned her on several occasions during our training. And recording the site like a crime scene, how, in other words, systematically use photograph and GPS in the field. All these workshops were outside in a makeup situation. So what is a crime scene? If you establish a site has been damaged by humans, it said the site become a crime scene and need to be described as such. That's the meaning of this concept here. And everything you do to describe the site is to be in context, meaning that as in relationship between the whatever you are trying to describe and the word around it. And you can do that, using photograph, GPS, and use and take log notes of those are the instruments you use to describe the scene. Why did you describe it that way? We will come to that in a second, but in general, the idea to describe a site is that allowing yourself, but anybody else that want to come to the site to recognize where the site is and what kind of feature are there. So, as I said, that you need to use photograph and including the surrounding as a context, and that will help to recognize the site in the future viewers on others. We will use a camera that a lot of phone now have an application that include a GPS coordinate, but if you have a GPS unit, that's great as well. You can use it as well. And important thing is to take a log of the picture you were taking. And what is important you keep in mind when you take a picture is what the photos is showing. So a description of that. When the photo was taken, so you have to have a date and time is important. Where the photo was taken within the site, because that's another. So where you're taking the picture from, and why the photo is important. So the description, it's very relevant. Why is it relevant? So all this information will go into a log, and we have a format of a log that we are being recommended to use. We'll show it in a second. Here is the process by which you're taking picture. The first picture you want to take, let's say if you go to the shelter or any other place, you want to take a picture from a distance that include the shelter as well as the most relevant context close to it, which is the mountain where the shelter is part of. And of course, you may want to indicate from which direction you're taking the picture, so that the new visitor, let's say, I'm going there, and Jim come in a week later, he knows that, okay, put in the same orientation, he knows where it is, because the picture tells him it's been taken from that direction. Then you take a second picture at the mid distance, showing in the immediate surrounding of the site. And finally, close up. And of course, close up of that site. And then, so of course, this applies to a site itself, but also applies to the feature inside the site. If you wanted to take a picture of the feature, the first picture that you take include the feature and the site, the surrounding, a context in which this feature is located, and then your middle and a close-up. Always you have at least 3 pictures that describe that. If you can have a picture from multiple angles, especially when you create the baseline, which we need to do for all the site in the preserve, that's the better. Application that, well, I use a Solocator because Sean recommended that, but any other application, I know Jim use a different one. As long as you have an application that takes 2 pictures, one with the GPS coordinate, the other one without, you're cool. There are, other than some are better than other, but that's the concept. Bottom line, never go home and edit the pictures with crop enhancement or kind of stuff like that. That's really a no to do. Okay. By the way, Solocator costs 99 cents if you want to buy. It's not expensive. I don't know what the other one that Jim is using, but they're all around that kind of price. Gina, I think it is. Okay. So this is an example of a picture of a site. You see that the site is over here on this rock, but there is a context around it. And in this case, part of the context is the size. So what is the dimension? So intentionally, somebody was there being part of the first picture. The second one is a mid distance picture, and then the close up at the end. This sign here is, and I will show it to you. I have it in front of me in my hands. Is what you're going to use to in the picture to indicate where the north is. By the way, I have one of these for each one of you. First time I see you, I will give it to you. I made a few copies of the one I received from Samantha. Okay, so this is a log, example of a log. We have, of course, a log in white, blank, so we'll take it with us, and I will number the picture, give it the location, a description, and so forth. So you don't need to spend, write the book, but each picture has its own name from where it's been taken and what's about. Okay. Finally, why it's important to record your site, of course, is remember what is at your site, remember where things at the time you visit, and is a guide for you and any other site steward that will visit the site after you. And of course, obviously, if you upload that, the land manager, and if the case, law enforcement for vandalism will read that. John was telling me, and Dusty was telling me that as you upload this information on the website, email goes to a specific number of people that read your stuff. So don't think that nobody see what you're doing. There is, especially if there is a report on vandalism, everybody is going to read it. So that's why it's important that we do that. Okay. Any question on this part? These are the basic behavior that we should have when you visit the site, basically.
I have a question on forms, and that is, I know we're in the state program, but we're also, the city is the land manager. So is the city in sync with the state site steward program in terms of the forms we're using when we're visiting sites as site stewards, in terms of reporting things to the city or the city reserve managers, as opposed to how we report to the state? Well, that's reporting and forms. So
Right.
are things in sync, or is that more discussions to come on that?
Right. Joe, probably you have a better answer to that than I do.
Yeah.
I know you are proposed a format for describing a site. I don't know if that came from the city, coordinated with Arizona.
Yeah, no, that's been part of the problem, Don, is that the city, what should have happened here is that it had gone by the way things normally would go, is that the city would create these site kits and then provide them to us. But they've been so focused on other things, particularly Pima Dynamite, they hadn't even started the kits.
Right. They
So
didn't have anybody
city,
to make them.
yeah, nothing was provided at all,
Right.
Don. And the little bit that I started working with some people was something that I sort of came up with from something that Sean had sent. So really, it's been us doing it, and I don't know if the city will ever do anything with it. I think it's really going to come down to us doing it, and then saying, letting the city look and see if they want to modify it. But I think to wait for them to create them, who knows how long it'll take.
No, I think your proactive approach is a good idea, because we don't want to wait forever.
Well, it's exactly right. We'd still be waiting to do anything if we followed sort of the regular protocol.
This log, for example, this is adopted by the state.
Right.
Yeah.
Site steward. So we are using this and say, well, that's what the state is using. If you have any recommendation to do anything different, welcome. But that is not made up by me or Joe or Mitch. It's something that come from. And by the way, Samantha said this is the last version that she's kind of a policymaker on this. and Sean mentioned her all the time. This is our
Yeah.
reference, and
Yeah.
so I think that's what we're going to use.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Franco. I can't imagine the city having
Yeah.
a problem with something that the state's using like that. So anyway,
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
And
So
there's if I may, to
Yeah.
build off of what you just said, there's another good reason for taking the initiative on this and pushing forward with things like what Joe has done with the kit. And that is, we've already got certified stewards. We are already in the process of visiting sites. If someone were to challenge us to say, hey, why does the city have all these people running over the landscape? Where are their procedures and where are their kits? By doing this work up front, not only will we establish standards for the city, which will save them time and money and effort, but we're also protecting ourselves from the standpoint that nobody can point the finger at us and say, well, these folks aren't organized, they aren't following proper procedures, et cetera.
absolutely, and to be honest, and to add to underline what you're saying is, the event today is really attempted to rekindle, if you want, some initiative that we had, training we had a couple, 2-3 years ago. And if we, after COVID, we want to restart the initiative, this is a reminder to all of us, this is the way we wanted to proceed on that, on visiting our sites. And we'll make few other comments at the end. I mean, I hope that will help us on that. So
I have a question.
yes, please.
For you, and that is, do we have or can we obtain through Sean an example of someone else's kit that we can use as a model?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. This is something else. Mitch and I were talking, and sit with Sean and openly said what our intentions are in the future. So try to, as was Joe started, visit the sites and start documenting in a standard way the sites, which and how to upload this information on the system, which is also, well, whether the current kit that are out there. Yes.
Yeah, and I was thinking our training included a list of what's normally in a kit, although we didn't look at a kit to see it. But
right.
So I think we have a list of what's supposed to be in there. So
right.
The idea that we can create a lot of that.
Yeah, we were not going to
before the city kind of is able to get to it. That sounds fine if we know what's, list of what's supposed to be in it.
By the way, some of us is also enlisted in a different site. I mean, different area, like a Cave Creek. So we have a chance to see kids on that area as example.
And you know what might be a good starting point, Franco, for doing this too, is the Dixiletta Village Ball Court one that Dawn, Ellen, and Pat Isaacson were for. We were going to go out and then things didn't work that we couldn't, but reason we could go out and use.
My back didn't work.
Your back didn't work, I know. And then Pat got tied up too. So no, not a problem. But this might be a good place to start because that site had, prior to this, fallen under the Cave Creek region's jurisdiction, Pam there. So she might have a kit from before for that site that we could use as a reference point too. And I know you know her, Dawn, or at least she remembers you. So I don't, when I met her there, she knew you. But that may be a starting point for that kit. She may have something for that.
We, and this is, we have to decide what a kit he is, in fact. And that's a more, we have to, let's talk about that at the end of this. I have only a couple of slides here. But in general, yes, it's absolutely agreeing with you. Finally, archaeology sketching. Why taking a sketch map of the site? The instructor, Neil, Winsberg is an archaeologist, spent 35 years in north part of Arizona. Is just retired, but still very active anyway. And so the fact of the matter is that if you know Google Earth and then you go through all the technology associated with that, you can download the site much better than any other drawing that you can ever do. Problem is, the people that can do that probably count on one hand in Arizona. So he said, what we have done extensively is to learn how to sketch a site. A quick sketch can be enough to identify the location of the site and identify the major feature of it, and allow you and everybody else, if you do it properly, to be able to get back to the site. So that's the purpose of that. You don't need to be an artist, and you don't need to do anything perfect, but you can help to get back to the site. And so, what you need to have in a sketch map, you need to have the north direction, of course. You need to have a scale. Usually, well, you can buy a paper that have one grid element, 10 meters. Otherwise, you can make your own. Like in our exercise, we made our own. You need to identify on the map the site number, the name and the site. Every site has a number as well. An agenda, if you don't mind, just to, if you use symbols in the sketch, make sure that somebody else can understand what you meant with that. A mapping point, meaning the mark from which you took the picture, because we were taking a sketch map of ballpark, and so you can do it from now south toward north, east to west. The shape is totally different. So how do you know? Put a cross in the circle, and that is your mapping point. Environmental references are important. If there is all around, where are the major, if there are roads, bridges, gates, whatever, that help to orient a visitor when he comes there. And of course, your name and the date when you did it. So with all that, here it is. This is a ball court that is at Pueblo Grande, that made by me. It's not very much. It's nothing very special. There's mine is 1 inch, was 5 meters. This is my scale. Someplace I put my name here and the date. My mapping point is here. As a gate when you get in is there. There's a walking trail here with interpretive sign, a couple of creosote here and there, and a tree. So that's it. There's a bank, the banking on down, and in the middle is a square with some stones, whatever. If you go and visit, hey, probably you will recognize it somehow. It's nothing really exceptional. See, I put some mark here that helped me to me, it was probably 35 meter long and 15, 18 wide. That was my, and that's what he's want to exercise yourself to, is to walk from one location to another where that you know where the distance is, and try to educate your steps to equate to 1 meter. At that point, when you walk the feature, like in this case, you can ballpark the size of it. That's it. Very simple. But you don't need, I mean, Google Earth is much better. It will take probably a week to get through that. In here, it took me 10 minutes. It's not great. It's not a big deal. You recognize.
That's good, Franco. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I
So
think
I'm
we have
getting
our
proud.
artist. Yeah.
Okay. So by the way, Chris, thank you for, nice to see you. Okay. So next workshop was about historic artifacts identification. Tremendous amount of information here. And I really running through because I don't know how to do it otherwise. And the first step they look at that is about look at dumps. You know, we are looking at the mounds on Holcomb. And so, well, same thing, we have our own mounds, and those, we call it dumps. And that's, in dumps, you find if something is older than 50 years, we call it is an antique, right? So that's the first thing. And I'm not spending more time on that. And I spend a lot of time also identify different type of glass. Glass is either by their shape, their color, the marks they have. Basically, you can tell whether they're being 1912 or after 1912 and so forth. There is a full presentation of this, and I will make it available to you. They condense it a couple of days of workshop into 2 hours. So that's what we went through really quick. And lastly, we went through identified cans, discussion on cans. This started with a picture of when first time that the whole exercise of preserving food in cans, and that's a story on its own. As I said, I'm not spending more time than this because otherwise I'll spend another 2 hours following their presentation. Just to tell you, it's available, it's full of information, and most importantly, both the Great and Thomas Jones offer their own expertise. If we find something to preserve, and we want to know, is a piece of glass or a can, where is that from and which date, we can send a picture and they're willing to do the evaluation for us. So extremely interesting. Very, very available people. And by the way, they know us, quote unquote, because they know Mark, the archaeology of the city of Scotland. And finally, the last workshop I went through is the Northern Arizona Ceramic by Jason Ness. He's a DNA and worked as an archaeologist, and he went through, I don't know, was talking probably 15 to 20 miles an hour, couldn't really write anything. Extremely fascinating the way he presented his stuff. The only thing that I can tell you is that for a Native American to get to make a vase, it takes probably a couple of months just to prepare the clay. In a, you know, every say basic elements here. It depends where what is in it, and go through several weeks of wetting them, wait how they dry, and then re-wet them, and then re-dry them, and so forth. It takes about, said, between 6 and 8 weeks. You don't think, guys, what is? I took this picture of the museum, and that's the basic technique they're using it today, is to create little sausages of material and create the form that way, and then smooth it up both with the stone inside and a palette of wood on the outside. So that's, I don't have a presentation with that. He had several buckets. I mean, I don't know how many buckets he had of different kind of material you can use to make vases. And certainly this is, you know, based on the compound of that is that you can tell where this pottery is being made and by whom. He knows how to do that. Interesting enough, the only thing that I can add to this, you were saying, some people say, I don't understand why some vases have a very, very small entrance or mouth. And so those vessels were specifically designed that way to contain seeds, because that's easy to close them and easy to reduce the amount of air that's in it, so that preservation. If you have a vessel with a white mouth, they usually is for water or mixing or cooking. So that's the only thing I remember on that. Too much. I think Ellen went to the same workshop. I don't know if he had anything to add to that. But
No,
that's
it was amazing though to hear how he could identify based on the color of the clay and the ink or what they used for coloring and design, any location or any tribe that produced something. He really had it down.
Well, thank you, Franco, for talking trash for a while to us. My screen says end of slideshow, click to exit. Maybe you have
Yeah.
to click somebody.
Franco?
Looks like Franco is frozen there.
Oh,
Yeah.
No.
Franco hasn't moved in
there
a
he goes,
while.
there he goes.
There, yeah, there it is.
Good. It sounds like a good conference. I'm glad some people were able to go.
You know, did we lose Franco? Yeah, I guess we did.
Yeah.
Hey, Mitch, just a thought after Franco's talking about this, that might be an interesting topic for a lecture once we start doing lectures again,
Sure.
is the whole idea of ceramics, because I think people have
yeah.
no clue. Now, Franco started talking about it, how the making of the ropes or the snakes and how they did it.
Yeah,
I think people think that everything's done on a wheel that's spinning
Yeah.
around.
Not.
And just the whole, how it was done, and then maybe elements of that could be an interesting topic. So something to think about.
It's good. Good. I saw Jason does his talk, and it's amazing. They actually do it in the ground. I was wondering if they had a kiln, but they do everything in the ground.
Yeah, they
I thought it was
dug pits.
fascinating. It's
Yeah,
very
they dug
interesting to get it
pits.
that hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. Oh, good. Are we waiting for Frank to come back on?
I think we've lost him.
He must be coming back in somehow.
I have a question going back to Jim, if I could ask Jim a question about Gila Bend. Is any of that area with all the petroglyphs and resources, is any of that on the National Register as a recorded archaeological site?
I don't know, but I would be surprised if it was not, because Southwest Archaeology are the folks that are kind of guiding this process, and they're working with the different tribes.
I apologize. I had some problem here, and I finally.
Back. All right.
Okay.
So a nomination may not have been prepared yet for that location based on the jurisdiction of the land in part.